Why are so many Americans renouncing their U.S. citizenship? This has been a big story in the news for years, ever since new laws in the United States came out that have been driving expats to hand back in their U.S. passports. And the issue that I have as someone who's been through this process is that the media often gets it wrong. Because when it comes to anything offshore, it's hard to entirely know unless you've done. I'm going to answer the question, why Americans are handing in their passport, in this video. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson, and here's the reality. Nobody really knows how many people are renouncing U.S. citizenship. You see, the U.S. government maintains what they call a name and shame list, where they publish a list of covered expatriates every quarter. The media has latched onto this, and they've said, hey, in 2016, well over 5,000 people renounced. In 2017, a slightly lesser number, still over 5,000 renounced. 2018, first quarter, still trending down a little bit, but over 1,000 people. The truth about that list is that not everyone who is a covered expatriate is on it, and not everyone who isn't. So the list is notoriously inaccurate, and really, who knows how many people have given up U.S. citizenship, because there's so many different reasons that people do it. But the media has talked about this tiny number, and yes, it is a tiny number in contrast to how many people are obtaining U.S. citizenship, how many people are waiting in line. But I'm going to talk about the reasons people do this. There are a wide number of them. Not all of the reasons apply to each renunciant. And perhaps if you're looking into this for yourself, you'll see, is this something for me? Now, the big thing the media talks about, number one, is taxes. Now, the United States has always had this policy, long after every other country abandoned it, that, hey, we're going to tax our citizens no matter where they live. We have plenty of videos where we talk about that here on our channel. You can check those out. And so a lot of people who are, as a friend of mine, he's living in Switzerland for 20 years. He says, I'm a Swiss citizen. I don't need a U.S. passport. I don't need this nonsense. It's getting in the way of my business in Switzerland. He says, I'm just going to renounce. So taxes are a reason, but the bigger reason is in the details. For one person who came to me recently, the issue was compliance. We went through everything he was doing. He has businesses all around the world. Some businesses in the United States that pay plenty of U.S. taxes, but he also has operations in other countries that weren't paying U.S. taxes because they're operating in other countries. What happened under some of the new tax laws that came out under the Trump America First tax reform was that he was going to have so much complexity in his tax return thanks to GILTI and thanks to all these different provisions that are new, that when I talked to a friend of mine who's a tax lawyer, he said, this guy, it's probably going to cost him $70,000 or $80,000 a year to do his taxes. Just to file, not to pay, but to comply under all the new provisions, because you'd have to have different people in every country handling things. It just became overwhelming. He said, forget it. I'll just renounce. Other people, there was a big story that came out, I believe in the Wall Street Journal recently, where they talked about what was called the transition tax under the Trump tax reform, where people who lived in other countries, including high-tax countries, the UK, Australia, were being forced to pay a transition tax of about 15% on all the money they had piled up since 1986 as what's called retained earnings, money that they had kept in the company, hadn't distributed. The U.S. previously didn't tax it. They said, hey, now we're going to come in and we want to tax it. And so those people who are in those high-tax countries, let's say they live in London, they were having to declare, in some cases, dividends from their own UK, in that case, company, take the money out, pay some UK tax, then give it to the US, all because they're living in a different country. It wasn't like they were sitting on some island in the Cayman Islands necessarily. They weren't sitting in a tax haven. There are a lot of people, I would say most of the people who are renouncing are because they just got stuck in the system. The other big thing that often also goes undiscussed is what's called FATCA. And you can watch our video on this as well, where not only do you have to report and pay and file on all your taxes, but you have to report all of your foreign bank accounts, your foreign brokerage accounts, lots of different accounts, now on numerous different forms. And what that did was it made a lot of countries, a lot of banks in other countries say, wow, this is really burdensome, complying with all these rules. Let's just not take U.S. citizens. And I've had numerous people over the years call me and say, what do I do? Because I'm running a company with these guys in Europe, and they don't even want to be my business partner anymore because they're having trouble getting credit, getting bank accounts, doing business. In some cases, even getting contracts, because there were some companies that said, we don't want to do business with people with the U.S. We don't want that exposure. So this is kind of the tax and compliance and infrastructure that the U.S. has put in place. where everyone, citizen, green card holder, whatever, resident or not, no matter how long they've lived there, or how long they've not lived there, has to follow all these rules. And so, what happened was it just became extremely burdensome for people. New rules now under the America First tax reform saying you can't even live overseas and retain earnings anymore. Now you've got to pay a certain amount of tax. You've got to have a formula for calculating how much dividend you're going to pay. You've got to take some of the money out. You've got to pay a certain tax and you get a 50% credit. It's become more confusing. People who have the option have increasingly said, I want out. But taxes and finances and compliance and burdensome business practices aren't the only reasons. I had a guy who came to me recently who said, Andrew, I'm a libertarian. I would rather be a citizen of a country like one in the Caribbean. Let me get a passport there. I'll sell some of my cryptocurrency. I'll invest in a passport in that country. And I just don't want to be associated with this. And I know how he feels because, when you're from a country, you just don't feel like you fit in there. I remember going to different countries and using the U.S. passport, and sometimes it's like, they give you the stink eye, you feel embarrassed. I had another guy who was British by birth, and he became American. He never liked the British part. He didn't want to use the UK passport, and he wanted to keep the US passport because he felt like without it, he would go back to being British, and he would be embarrassed about that. So there's a whole list of things that people feelings about citizenship, that, especially in a country like the United States, not everyone believes that they fit in. Not everyone wants to be associated with that. And while the U.S. passport is one of the world's best passports, a lot of people say, you know what, I'll gladly get a couple of extra visas to get this burden out of my life and to feel better. I can tell you for me, I don't have a problem visiting the United States, but the idea of going and saying, hey, this is my country, these are my values, I feel a lot more comfortable now. And it's not even necessarily about tax or finance or any of that. Sure, it's nice to be able to open up a foreign company and not have to file this many forms for it. Be able to open a bank account and not be harassed or have to fill out extra forms or worry about reporting it or worry about some of the stress. But the bottom line is, for many expat entrepreneurs, people who own businesses in other countries, in many cases paying tax in those countries, sometimes not, and that's fine too, but often cases living in the Switzerlands, the UKs, the Australias, paying plenty of tax, part of that life, part of that country, the U.S. overreached more than any other country in the world, and they said, we don't want to be a part of this anymore. There's a myth that it's all about Trump. Before that, it was all about Obama. Maybe about Obama's policies with FATCA and all the things he put into place. This idea that people are leaving because they don't like Trump has always been nonsense, and we've seen that personally here at Nomad Capitalist. But what one person did tell me is, it's not about Trump. It's about the role of the government as what he called a quote-unquote psycho girlfriend, where you never know what they're going to do next. Is tomorrow going to be the day where they do the next thing, where they go back to 1986 and say, oh, we changed the rules? You never know, he said. And that, I think, is why a lot of people are saying, I'll be better off over here. I'm going to go where I'm treated best. I'm Andrew Henderson, and if you're looking for a way to legally reduce your taxes, build your freedom, and create wealth faster as a global citizen, then you've come to the right place. I want you to do 3 things right now. Number 1, click the button to subscribe to our channel. Make sure to get notifications so you never miss a new video. Number 2, get a copy of our #1 best-selling book, Nomad Capitalist, on Amazon and learn all the dozens of benefits of our lifestyle. And number 3, if you're already a 6- or 7-figure entrepreneur and you want to put these strategies in place, go to nomadcapitalist.com and find out how to get some help.